So next, I want to go ahead and team up here my esteemed colleague, Paul Bell. He's going to be talking to us about the IGEL product and why it helps deliver the ultimate end user experience. So Paul, take it away, sir. Thank you very much.
Sure. Hey, Jason and everybody. Thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be part of this Solution Summit again. So let's start. IGEL. So who are we? What do we do? How can we help you? That's kind of the things that we're here to talk about today. Jump to this slide a little bit early and we'll get to that. So IGEL, as many people have probably heard of us by now. I see a lot of familiar names on the attendee list. Often people think of IGEL as a thin client provider. So that's what we used to do. But really today we've kind of focused and transformed more into an operating system. So if you look at the slide that we've got up here, this ERA slide, I hesitate to put these in because everybody in the deck, everybody has seen these slides before, and I mock them myself. But again, this is kind of what computing has looked like, over the past 40 years or so. Obviously, we started with mainframes and terminals, all the processing happening on the far end in the data center, not so much on the endpoint. As we got into ERA 2, that started to shift a little bit, where we started doing more locally on the endpoint. And then you can obviously see, we've kind of graduated into, more cloud workspaces and things of that nature. So one thing to point out, IGEL, we've really been around since ERA 2. So about 20 years ago or so is when we got into the game of building an edge operating system. So throughout ERA 1, 2, or 3, user experience has always been the driving factor. And there's been a lot of emphasis put on, delivering that great experience through Citrix and things of that nature. But what gets lost is the endpoint. How are we going to manage the endpoint? How are we going to make that, cost effective? And how are we going to be able to provide a high quality user experience at the endpoint level? And that's where IGEL comes into play. So again, since about 20 years or so, we've been working on a purpose-built edge operating system that's really built to connect to your cloud computing environment. And when I say cloud, I mean, that could be, a public cloud, offered through Citrix Cloud. That could be Citrix on-prem. That can really be anything that you're running virtually in the Citrix world. So again, we don't really care where the Citrix infrastructure is hosted. We just want you to know that whether it's on-prem, whether it's remote, we can connect to all of that. We can manage the endpoint that way. And we've got some really interesting ways to do that. So how do we keep the endpoints secure? How do we deliver a great user experience? How do we maximize budget? We do that all by using the IGEL operating system. There's a few ways that we can consume that OS, so we don't want to limit to just one particular hardware set or anything like that. The first way we do it is by using the IGEL UD Pocket. So that's this little device right here, if you can say it. It's a bootable USB. So if you plug this in and you boot up, you'll be running a full version of the IGEL operating system. So the IGEL OS has a lot of benefits. The first one, as Jason mentioned, it's a read-only Linux operating system, and it's extremely easy to manage. So you don't need to know anything about Linux to be able to use it from an end user standpoint or to be able to manage that operating system. We've got over 7,000 options within our management console, which is called the UMS, the Universal Management Suite, and they're all menu driven. So whether we're talking about, pushing out or leveraging the latest, greatest version of Citrix Receiver or integrating with ControlUp or something like that, everything can be managed through the IGEL OS. Now, this UD Pocket here, this is a temporary conversion of your device. So if I take this and I plug it into a laptop, a desktop, a MacBook, whatever that might be, and boot from this, you'll be running the IGEL OS fully managed by your organization. And the internal operator or the local OS that's installed on the hard disk, that remains completely intact, completely isolated from the IGEL OS. So whatever OS you're running on there, that could be, a user's personal operating system in a BYOD scenario, that could be riddled with viruses or malware or anything like that, all becomes irrelevant when you're using this UD Pocket. So where we see the UD Pocket in use is around a bunch of contractor work from home users and a lot of BYOD. So in Houston, we have a really large scale healthcare organization that said, you know what, we are never, ever going to let any BYOD into our environment. So people are asking to bring their laptops in, their MacBooks, all that, but they said, nope, 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 we can't do that. Too big of a security risk. That was until we introduced the UD Pocket to them. So what they really meant was, we're not going to allow your hardware, or I'm sorry, your operating system onto our network, but we will allow your hardware onto the network, provided it's running this. So in that particular case, the user comes in, they take their UD Pocket, they boot it up, and it will automatically connect to their network, give them access to the EMR. This particular customer is using Cisco ICE, so it's all provisioned to contact the Cisco ICE server, download the correct certificates, get a machine-based certificate, and allow them onto the secure network. So this is just one way that we've got one customer doing it. Another customer that I'd like to highlight is a call center BPO. So they do outsourcing for a number of organizations that you've likely heard of, unfortunately, that I can't mention. But their business model is they have 4,000 users spread throughout the globe offering work from home call center support. So what they ended up doing was buying these UD Pockets, sending them out to each member service rep that's working from home, using their own hardware, plugging in, booting up, and then connecting back to their virtualized environment, thus allowing this organization to not have to carry the hardware costs, to securely manage all of their endpoints, be able to remotely control them, push out configuration changes, things of that nature. But what was really great is it allowed these work from home users on non-company hardware to achieve PCI DSS compliance. So for those of you that are not familiar with that, PCI DSS is payment card industry standard for processing credit cards. So through the IGEL OS on their own hardware, leveraging this UD Pocket, they were able to achieve that, which was a really big deal and broke down a lot of barriers for them. So moving ahead, the direct install. So this is another way that we can leverage the IGEL OS. And this is the most popular and the one that we generally will encourage. So again, we can use the UD Pocket to temporarily convert, but we can also deploy the IGEL OS onto the hardware that you already own. So provided it's got an x86 processor, 2 gigs of RAM, and 2 gigs of disk, we can convert that and we can get some extra life out of that hardware and really give a great user experience. The conversions can happen multiple ways as well. So the first way is using a USB boot stick. So if you go to igel.com, you can download our software. You get a little executable, which will allow you to create a bootable USB, throw that into any device running our minimum specs. And that can be, again, that can be a thin client from another manufacturer. That could be a fat PC. It can be a laptop. It can really be just about anything. Throw that USB stick in, boot up, and you can convert the OS that way. If you are an SCCM shop, which many of you likely are, we do have an SCCM plugin, so you can remotely deploy the IGEL OS via SCCM. You can have that in a completely unattended manner. So the next time the machine boots up or on a particular schedule, that device is going to get converted over to IGEL. Or you can have it so the user has to initiate that conversion. For those of you that are not using SCCM, but are also looking to convert Windows endpoints, we do have a standalone executable and an MSI installer, which you can load into your environment. That will basically create an IGEL agent on those Windows endpoints. And when you're ready, through our management console, you can just right-click on those machines and you can convert them at any time. And then finally, we do offer support to re-image machines or convert them via Pixie. We actually have a nice little Pixie appliance, which is completely free. So if you want to convert something perhaps non-Windows, maybe running a different version of Linux OS, if we can Pixie boot those machines, then we can convert them. No issues at all there. And then lastly, the third way to consume the IGEL OS is using IGEL hardware. So again, our focus is always, I'd like you to use what hardware you have in your existing environment, convert that to IGEL, and really save some money and be able to free up some budget to focus on other things, not just replacing good hardware with something newer. But should you find yourself in a situation where you don't have hardware that's compatible, or you do need to buy new hardware, one of the ways you can do that is by going to igel.com and getting some of our hardware. So all of our hardware here, this is our UD2 model. If you can see that with the virtual background, kind of, sort of. They're all purpose built, and they're good for certain use cases. First off, everything comes with a 5-year warranty. It's designed to go much longer than that. I have some customers that I see on here that have been running IGEL, same hardware, for roughly 10 years. So it is built to last, but you want to make sure you get the right hardware for your particular use case. So the UD2, if you're doing access to clinical applications, if you're in healthcare, EMR, basic task worker type of thing, that's going to be perfect for you. It comes with 2 display ports. If you go over to our UD3, that's a device we'd be looking at if you were going to do like Teams optimization, Zoom optimization and offloading, things of that nature. It's a little bit beefier, and it's certified with Citrix to be able to provide Teams optimization, things along those lines. And that provides up to 4K video playback. And finally, our UD7, that's really where you're going to want to go if you're doing kind of CAD design, things along those lines, and need more to like 3 or 4 monitors. So that is our hardware lineup. But that being said, we do partner with a bunch of other hardware companies where you can buy the IGEL OS either preloaded from the factory or completely certified. So if you have some of their hardware, and I've got that highlighted in blue there, so whether that is an HP devices, Lenovo devices, things of that nature, you can buy IGEL hardware or non-IGEL hardware that's completely certified and guaranteed to work no matter what. So on this slide here, I really kind of wanted to dive in what I feel makes our operating system extremely great. We have great management and all that, and I'll give you a little demo in a bit to kind of show you around that. But the secret and the sauce is really the great partners that we have and the integrated technologies that we have. So again, on this slide, anything highlighted in blue there, that's the hardware that we work with in lockstep. We do support a lot of other hardware, but these are our partners there. As you can see in yellow, I've also got a few of the people that are on the call with us today highlighted, as well as we have their software and their technologies baked into the OS. So for instance, Citrix. So we use the real version of the Citrix Workspace app for Linux. In fact, we bundle 3 versions of that within our operating system. So if you're running on the bleeding edge technology of Citrix, you may want to go with the latest and greatest Citrix Workspace app. If you're maybe on a little bit behind, you need to run with something a little bit older, no problem. It's just a click and a drop down away from being able to choose that older client. You don't have to reboot the devices. You don't have to reconfigure anything. You don't have to install anything. It's all right there. Control Up is another one. So if you want to start getting some metrics into the actual IGEL device, or look at that last mile, because maybe you have a work from home user, or somebody who's remote that's saying, you know what, I'm just not getting the experience that I want. And you say, okay, well, we know the IGEL is good. We know the Citrix is good. So let's try to take a dive in. So through our management console, it's literally just a checkbox, point to your Control Up appliance, and then we can start gathering metrics on that. You may find out, what, the issue is actually, the network or something like that at their home. So right here, again, just a overview of who we partner with. There's over 80 embedded technologies, but the key thing that I want you to take away from this is the simplicity of it all. So when you're using an IGEL endpoint, that your Control Up and your Control Up agent and the Citrix Workspace app that you're using, and the Dragon Nuance Power Mic, that those are all going to kind of work together, because we've taken the heavy lifting out of testing those and ensuring that everything is going to play together nicely.
Hey, Paul, we got a question that came in here. I just thought I'd toss it out since we're talking about this section. They saw the Raspberry Pi slide. Can you kind of double click a little bit about the ARM processing and how that works with the IGEL partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Raspberry Pi through End Computing is something that we've been working on for a while. And I say recently, I think all the months start to blend together in the post-COVID era, but probably about a year ago or so, really came to market with it. So we do work with the End Computing Raspberry Pi. It is built for Citrix environments. And we're constantly improving on it on every day. So you get the same great form factor, low power consumption, and all the things you would expect from the Raspberry Pi. But we've taken it to the next level, kind of making it more enterprise ready and partnering with people like Citrix to be able to give you the best experience possible from that little relatively inexpensive device. Okay, so because we have a displaced workforce now, people are working from all over, I just want to point out that we do have something called the IGEL Cloud Gateway, which allows you to remotely manage IGEL endpoints from absolutely anywhere over the public internet. You don't need a VPN, you don't need to jump through any hoops like that. It's literally just an appliance that you stand up in the cloud or in your DMZ, and it allows full remote management capabilities. So whether that's updating firmware, or remotely shadowing a device, or pushing out configurations, things of that nature, laying files down on the desktop, updating certificates, anything like that. Anything I would traditionally show you in a demo, which I'm going to give you a small canned one in a few minutes here. We can do this from outside the environment. So you don't need a VPN, you don't need special leased lines, you don't need SD-WAN or anything like that. This is just for the IGEL management traffic. Keep that in mind as well. So when you connect to Citrix, if you did require a VPN or something like that, that's still going to remain in place. But as far as managing the endpoint, our IGEL Cloud Gateway will act as an intermediary between your UMS and your devices out in the field, and give you that seamless capability as far as management is concerned. Okay, so I did want to kind of show you quickly what converting an IGEL device looks like the first time it boots up to the network, and just kind of showcase how we can do a true zero-touch conversion deployment, however you want to do it, into the IGEL OS. So in this particular demo, I'm going to show you a virtual machine in this particular case that's going to be booting up to IGEL from the first time, and what the process works like. But again, we're using a VM here, it doesn't matter. You could use that USB boot stick, a UD pocket. You could convert your devices, through SCCM. The key point being here, as soon as it boots up to IGEL for the first time, this is the kind of process that you can expect to happen. So we'll let this get going. You'll start seeing the machine boot up in a second. It's automatically connecting to the network, and that IGEL setup assistant has already been aborted. It's found the UMS already. So what it's done is it's looked up a specific DNS entry. It's added itself under management, and now it's adding itself into a particular folder in our UMS for Alchemy, and it's going to provision itself to whatever policies we had in that Alchemy folder here. So again, the device has never been on the network before. First time it's booting up. We've already downloaded the Alchemy wallpaper. We've added Chromium, which is one of our integrated browsers, onto the desktop. If you look in our console here, we now see this machine under management. I'm going to remotely shadow it. And we're just going to launch the Citrix Cloud icon. So I've got this already pre-configured to connect up to Citrix Cloud, pull one of my virtual desktops out of the pool, and present the user with a usable desktop that way. If you look on the lower left-hand side here, lower right-hand side, we've only put a handful of policies there, basically setting the wallpaper, dropping Chromium on the desktop, and doing a little bit of Citrix configuration, in this case, storing my credentials and things of that nature, just to kind of showcase this. But if you wanted to prompt the user for authentication, we could do that. If you're using MFA, no problem at all. That's going to work, according to whatever workflow you want. Again, in this demo, we're just showing, launching a particular desktop. If you were using, XenApp, you have published applications on the desktop, you wanted to give more of a Windows-like user experience, no problem. We can take care of all of that for you as well. So as we start wrapping up here, as we had a limited time today. So what can you achieve with IGEL? So our goal is always to free up money, free up budget, so you guys can not have to worry about the endpoint and focus on other things, revamping that Citrix environment, really getting the extra the extra horsepower and stuff out of that. So reducing admin costs. By running an IGEL endpoint versus run a traditional Windows endpoint, things like patching, just deployment management becomes very, very easy. So things that you might have taken a fair amount of time on to make sure your devices are always secure, always up to date, that kind of goes away. When we do our patching, we do like roll-up patches, right? So let's say our traditional install is about 1.5 gigs. The new version is 1.6 gig. We're only copying 100 meg up or to that device. So we're only changing, we're only copying the deltas, so what's changed. So we can greatly reduce that upgrade time or that patching time. And we can even take that a step further and reduce features that aren't used and things like that. Saving on hardware costs. We see so many places that just, get new hardware for the sake of getting new hardware. Or they get new hardware because they have other vendors that say, well, you want to run the latest and greatest, Citrix Workspace app, you need new hardware so you can get this particular OS that we sell on top of that. We throw that out the window. That doesn't mean anything to us. We need relatively low spec hardware. So pretty much anything built in the past 10 years, x86 processor, 2 gig of memory, 2 gig of disk if you're installing locally, get some life out of that hardware. Once that hardware dies, you can reclaim the IGEL license and you can deploy it to anything else you want. Our hardware, somebody else's hardware, old stuff you've had sitting on a pallet. Doesn't really matter to us. Just reuse that hardware. And by reusing that old hardware, often we can reduce the power. You can save some money on power as well. We don't need bleeding edge technology and the latest and greatest hardware to be able to run IGEL. So again, just reuse that hardware, regain some time back so your admins can do a little bit more in the organization rather than patching Windows endpoints and managing Windows endpoints, and really just kind of focus that budget onto other things. So with that, I think I'm right around time. I just want to say thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or reach out to us after. I'd love to go deeper.